Hello, my name is Isabel Rizzo, and I will be sharing how art will be healing in a post COVID world. My intention and view and vision for a post pandemic art world is really a need for community art practice, recovery through immersive art practice, financial stability for artists and engagees, and intersections of human experience, art, science, and spirituality becoming more and more prevalent in art within community and within the commercial art world. Now, when it comes to the intention of community art, what we currently have is a cult of celebrity, which is very much a big part of Western culture. On the left, I have some forgotten artists that slowly have become prominent and that did not have any commercial or financial success until recently or post-mortem. And on the right, I have very much commercial artists that are also considered brands that are financially very much a cult of personality. And in the center, I have an artist that I consider to be a little balance of both the cult of celebrity and community artist. On the left, you'll see Yayoi Kusama in the room of Henry Darger, which you can see his room in the Museum of Intuitive and Outsider Art in Chicago. He created an extensive body of work that was only found close to the end of his life and is now preserved in the Museum of Intuitive and Outsider Art. And then at the top above that, you'll see Yayoi Kusama's work, who has recently come to the international stage of a celebrity status. However, her journey to get to this space was full of mental illness, poverty, and a lot of wanting to create community art in a time when community art was not celebrated in a commercial sense. On the right, we have the brand Supreme, which many people know of. It started out as a very intentional art brand, or at the point now that they are selling bricks with the Supreme logo on them, makes it a sacred, sanctified object of art that people would pay thousands of dollars for, which I personally think is a little bit ridiculous pre-COVID and post-COVID, and I hope that that may shift and change in a post-COVID art world where community art is considered valuable and healing for the individual artist and for their respective communities, both online and offline. And the same goes for Jeff Koons's work, where he's taken inanimate objects, blown them up to scale, and really is more of the businessman behind the art. But is it really contributing in any healing way, in any community way to the majority of the population? I would argue that not really. In the center, we have Marina Abramovich, who definitely has a cult of celebrity around her, or most people will know her in the art world. And yet, she engages in community art through documentary film and through her Marina Abramovich Institute, which is an immaterial institute training and educating performance artists through mindfulness practices and also moving the body in a way that can be challenging their limits and their potential using their body. So she does a little blend of both using her cult of celebrity to bring awareness to things that may be a little more immaterial, spiritual, or healing, personally for her as an artist and for the communities that she engages in. Some examples that I have of a collaborative and more community art-based projects are the She Spoke International Exhibition, which was in Prague, that I feel very lucky that I was a part of, which was gathering a group of women to speak on their individual journeys and then exhibit their artwork, their performances, their films in a space that used to be a post office. And actually, the art museum is now called Ex Post Gallery. So, still honoring the community feel of that. And to keep with that, everyone that attended was able to receive a postcard of the individual artist's work to continue that community practice of honoring where the space was, meeting the artist, and having engaging dialogues on the opening evening of the exhibition. Another really great example of a community practice or community art is the Museum of Broken Relationships, which was a museum that took stories and objects that represented the ends of different relationships. And this was community generated. So whoever wanted to send something to the Museum of Broken Relationships could. And so we take the hat off of what a typical artist is, and we bring that to the community and engage and invite individuals to be artists themselves by sharing their stories. The final example that I have here is the Supernova Storytelling Experience on the right, which is a curated storytelling event within a beautiful space called Chill. And Chill was a meditation space in the Loop in Chicago. Due to the pandemic, they have closed. However, before the storytellers would begin their performances, begin their shares, all of the participants, the engagees, which is a part of how I really want to continue the idea of artists and people that engage with their artwork. It's not a consumer, as a consumer is very passive and very much a exchange. Engagee is really fully being present with the artist, with the performer. So before the storytellers went off to perform, all of the engagees, the participants, were sent to another room to engage in meditation by a professional meditation facilitator so that when they arrived back into the space, at the end of the day, they came fully present, fully aware, and gave their undivided attention to the performers versus just a passing background thing. And this was something healing that could happen for the engagees and the participants, and also give space for the storytellers and the artists to be fully present with their own stories and what they want to instill or share within the space. Visual appreciation is what we currently have pre-COVID, and what I would love to invite us to envision is immersive arts experiences moving forward in a post-COVID art world. It's one thing to gaze upon a work of art. During the pandemic, we could pull any artwork we like from the internet and see it with our eyes. For some of us, it may have been also an opportunity to see artwork in person in a limited way or in a scheduled way. However, as Marinetti proposed in the Manifesto of Futurism to celebrate speed and machinery, I wonder if it's now the time to celebrate the basking in all of our human senses in a post-COVID world where a lot of our senses were actually diminished. We did not have space to feel and be immersed in art. We primarily were using our visuals, our eyes, maybe our ears to listen to sound. But what if we had immersive art experiences to bask in our human senses when engaging with art? So in contrast to Marinetti's Manifesto of Futurism, I want to propose a celebration of basking and slowness and taking in artwork through all of our five senses in an immersive and mindful way. These are a few examples of some immersive exhibitions that are currently happening. We have the Immersive Van Gogh exhibition that's still happening in Chicago, where there are projections and animations of Van Gogh's artworks that you can walk around the space in a beautiful warehouse space and just take it all in. You can walk on top of the artwork, you can hear sounds, you can hear narration. You can smell the air. It really creates a whole body experience of immersion. We have the New York City Immersive Meditation Space in the top right corner here, where there was a collaboration with individual architects, artists, and interior designers to create a space that would be used in a community fashion for meditation, for workshops, for various different things. But really, the intention was creating an aesthetic internal space where you are immersed in an artwork. And then one of my favorite immersive exhibitions is the Traveling Museum of the Moon, which is very popular in Europe. And I believe that this one is from a church in Germany, and in collaboration with various old churches in Europe, the artist brought this huge installation of the moon and lit it up from the inside, and people can walk and see the moon in its actual form. The bumps, the craters being exact replicas of the moon that we see in the sky, bringing it into a sacred space within a church space that brings a whole different dimension to what is sacred for the individual and for the community. When we talk about sustainability in career as part of my manifesto and what I envision in a post-COVID world, it is even now a joke that there is, for an artist, to be starving. And I really, really want to get rid of this idea. And here I have Picasso's guitarist during his blue period, and a little excerpt from Jamie Sabartes, who was a close friend of Picasso's, an intimate portrait on page 92, where they state, if he was contented, we all were, speaking on behalf of Picasso. For it is his fortune or misfortune to be able, quite unconsciously, to raise or to depress the spirits of those around him, since it is impossible for him, even if he were to try to dissimulate or conceal his state of mind. Not only do we have the idea of the starving artist, but we have the starving artist who is suffering, who is in the middle of mental health crisis and poverty, and that is the romantic notion of the artist. I really want to change this in really putting forth a sustainability in career through a multidisciplinary approach for artists as culture workers, culture changers, educators, art makers. Through a multidisciplinary approach, seeing that more and more present after the pandemic, artists during the pandemic had to use their creativity to survive. And I want that to be celebrated more than just the idea of I have to create a painting to be an artist and sell my paintings. There's so much more to being an artist than just selling paintings. What does this look like in practice? As artists, I think that we are creators in many different ways, and this also means creatives of our own lives. And the creative process can be used in creating life. And one of the things that I teach is looking at the various aspects of life. So here's an example of the wheel of life. What are the different categories? What are the things that are healthy? What are things that we can look at? What are things that are going really well right now that can be celebrated? Once those are considered, this is where we can see, where can I engage within my community? And this is where we take on the hat and the role of being a culture maker. Being an artist, we see the world differently, and community engagement is how we can model how we see the world, and through problem solving and creativity, modeling that for future generations within our own community, online and offline. Through this, financial education and financial well-being and growth for artists is a essential part of the sustainable culture shifting. And this means personal education for the artists and also all the organizations and communities that they are involved with as well, and understanding that there needs to be time, money, and energy involved for culture shifting and culture creation. Currently, and in pre-pandemic times, we have a lot of active observation. So there's mindfulness in observing art when we are in a gallery, when we are outside looking at an installation. However, I want to propose in a post-pandemic world that art becomes a generative experience. As André Breton stated in the Manifesto of Surrealism, the case against the realistic attitude demands to be examined, following the case against the materialistic attitude. What does he mean by this in the case of generative versus observative art? When we're being realistic and being very pragmatic, that is a really good skill to have. However, as artists, there are lots of liminal spaces that we dwell in and that can create new worlds, new ways of thinking, new generative ideas that can be healing, community oriented, individually empowering. And this is where we want to examine what are the mindsets that are coming in when they are engaging with our artwork, whether if it's the artist putting on a gallery show, or they are selling prints of their artwork, or creating music for a specific experience. We want to make sure that the art that is being made is generative for the engagees, the people that are engaging consciously with the artwork as well. Some examples of generative artwork instead of observative artwork is the work of Emma Kunz. And you'll see her here in her studio, where she's using the pendulum to create intuitive art and measure energies or frequencies at the time when people would visit her studio. And she was very active in being supportive for the polio outbreak that happened in Switzerland in the early 1900s. And so she created artwork that was very therapeutic and healing for many individuals to work through the cases of polio. We also have automatic writing as art, but also as a generative collective experience to see what arises within individuals that maybe have never engaged with their own subconscious, that have probably never engaged in a generative exercise. Because primarily artists are going to be working with non-artists, non-liminal space dwellers. And another more fun, lighthearted, generative art experience is the group Improv Everywhere, that they have been active since 2007 in collecting people to create flash mob experiences that are either creative, hilarious, or expansive. And they have now, I believe it is the 12th year that their No Pants subway ride still continues to this day, started from just an idea of improv artists coming together, and it has now become a global, really fun phenomenon. So I hope that we come back to the art world after the pandemic is over to really see that the artists really need a community art practice, that art is such a healing modality to be playing with, especially coming out of the pandemic when people may have been alone, may have experienced trauma, death, or loss. This is where recovery can really become positive and even measurable through immersive art practice to take us into a different world. More and more change and more healing can happen when there is financial sustainability for artists and engagees, that we honor these non-traditional artistic paths and events and experiences by compensating the artists accordingly. And of course, really meshing and blending these intersections of human experience, especially after the pandemic, when many people had to sit with themselves for the first time, maybe in a long time, and see where am I going with my life, because everything has been put on pause. So these intersections of human experience, art, the science of what is happening in the mind, in the body, and also spirituality, and what does that look like personally for each individual that comes into an immersive art practice or an immersive art experience. How do they define that for themselves? I hope that this is the world that we will have after COVID, and I already am seeing it happen, and I already am engaging and really committed to seeing this become more and more prevalent in the art world in Chicago and beyond.